Now, this is where the panelists will dive into a critical discussion on the global outlook of gaming, specifically its trajectory here in India. Now, we all know as India emerges as one of the world's fastest growing gaming markets, understanding global trends and innovations is also essential in order to navigate the challenges as well as the opportunities ahead. We've got a distinguished panel that's lined up right now, and they're going to bring their unique perspectives from different corners of the industry, and they'll also get to explore how India's gaming ecosystem can harness these global shifts to its advantage. So let's actually get ready. Let's get the stage ready to welcome them, and let's find out what really can make India a true gaming superpower. That this session will be spearheaded by Dibyojyoti Mainak, who's the General Counsel Mobile Premier League. Now, they often say that to get the right answers, one needs to ask the right questions, which is why we are in able hands of Dibyojyoti to spearhead this session and to extract relevant perspectives from his panelists. So let me go ahead and first, please invite Dibyojyoti to come on stage so that you and I can welcome your panelists as well. And let me go ahead and quickly invite our speakers, our panelists for the session as well. Joining Dibyojyoti, we have Nitin Goel, Country Manager, Indian Subcontinent, Gameloft. We have with us once again Sameer Pitalwalla, Head of Gaming Industry Sales, APAC Goel, and Shalet Roy, Director, Advertiser Sales, VEVE. You know, we're talking about global outlook, and if you're eager to get all that understanding from the panelists, then let's have an eager round of applause. Come on, let's bring that energy there. Let's give them that energy, and let's extract all the insights from them. Well, they're all set, they're all energized, they're all eager to get up for this panel discussion. So with that, Dibyojyoti, over to you then.
Right. First and foremost, a very, very warm welcome to my esteemed panelists, Sameer, Shalet, and Nitin. Doyens of the industry, of course, and a little tired right now because Sameer's just done one whole session. So maybe let me set some context. India, of course, has seen massive development in gaming. It's now one of the largest, sectors within the broader media and entertainment sector. At the same time, gaming continues to grow both in India and globally. In India, as we know, there are two parts to it. There is the paid competitive gaming, which has some of the biggest companies currently in the tech space in India, including companies like a Dream11, whether it's a Gamescraft, Games24/7. But then there's also free-to-play gaming with its big titles like BGMI, which is doing really well. And maybe we should start with free-to-play there, right? So my first question there is to you, Nitin. And if you can just explain to us, where do you see free-to-play if you compare it to PCG? Do you think free-to-play is ahead, or do you think it's yet to see its massive growth in India?
Well, an interesting question, right? So with respect to like the gaming in India, I would say I've been like for last 15 years in this space, right? And one thing which has really propelled the gaming in India has been the mobile gaming. PC console gaming is something which we have always seen to be a more niche all over the years. And if you look at the trends, like over the last a decade or so, you would see the evolutionary trends of the kind of business which the PC console gaming has versus what is the kind of business that had been driven across to the mobile gaming over the last decade. I would acknowledge the fact, right, so the growth which has come across is primarily on account of the very unique business model which had been adapted by the mobile gaming, which is free to play. It has really helped mobile gaming explode to roughly about like 90 billion plus kind of business that we happen to see. However, I'd say if I were to compare the kind of growth which has been witnessed globally, the kind of growth which has happened in India has been pretty subdued. While we had been like talking about multiple enablers which had been falling in place over the last 7-8 years on the mobile gaming space. But the kind of revenue that we have been able to drive in through all those developments which have happened, I would say it pales in comparison to other forms of media entertainment. Right? So if I were to look at it compared to the video entertainment, that seems to be significantly huger. But when it comes to the mobile gaming, it's relatively smaller and it's more skewed towards limited set of pretty successful games, right? But outside of those games, if I were to look from the monetization lens, there had been a level of challenge being witnessed across those titles. However, going forward in future, we expect more positivity with respect to the growth with the mobile gaming in India. And at the same time, I would say with the kind of consumerism which is evident in the Indian space today, one thing which really stands out is the people are spending wherein they see more aspirational value. So it's not about, I think I would say, it's not about value for money conscious perspective that we had been carrying in our minds. It's more about aspirational value that you are being able to drive. So that's where we see a lot of premiumization which is happening, and that's where I see the trend going to come across, both with respect to the PC and mobile gaming going forward.
Thanks so much, Nitin. And that's interesting that you mentioned about the growth in free-to-play being a little subdued. So I had an interesting stat. Royal Match is the largest game in the world by revenue. I believe they're closely followed by Monopoly Go, Roblox, Candy Crush, Genshin Impact. What I'm trying to say is, for the top 20 games globally by revenue, India ranks outside the top 15 markets for each of them. Shalet, I want to bring you in here. You're both a publisher as well as a brand marketer. Why is that the case, and how can India, move up the rankings?
Well, I think there are some trends that we see, right? Like how we, as people, are consuming what we have today out there. So be it content. I see gaming as another form of content that we all do. We individually did have too many options to choose from. Our attention spans are so small. I think all of us, I think Nitin and I were having this conversation earlier, where we said that, somebody spoke about attention spans which were like 8 seconds earlier, now we're talking about 3 seconds. And what do you communicate in that? And how much do you communicate in that? And I think somewhere, all of these trends of how we as consumers are consuming content, are bombarded with so much content, is basically driving all of this.
So just to push you a little further, so tell us as a publisher, what does an Indian brand need to do, an Indian publisher need to do differently to capture attention in that very crowded space?
I think innovation in how you show those ads to the audiences. Primarily, we see a lot of us not engage with ads that come in the face. Do we all do that? I think we all are pretty much people who do not like to engage with ads that are on the face. We want ads that make absolute sense to me as an individual. And I think that is the key to how monetization needs to be done today. It is about innovation. It is about individually reaching out to the person who is basically seeing the ad, is able to relate to how the ad looks. Only then will I really deep dive and say that, okay, this is what I want to engage with, this is what I want to be a part of, and hence, it'll start making sense. It's a long way to go, like Nitin said, that we are still at the brink of doing a lot of these things, but I think innovation in how we basically engage through ads with our audiences is going to be the key to how we move here.
Thank you so much. So let's step a little more towards the macro and come to you, Sameer. They say Google sees everything. So as a broader, when it comes to tech at a broader level, what are you seeing with respect to the patterns of Indian consumers' behavior and with respect to Indian consumers' consumption?
Yeah, I mean, Google might see everything, but I'm in cloud, so we don't see anything. But But the broad sort of parameters that we look at, if you look at just genres in India, action is by far the most dominant genre. It's followed by casual. And by dominant genre, I mean in both time spent as well as in terms of the average revenue per paying user. So that's sort of like dominant piece there, followed by casual and then followed by strategy. Now, strategy actually has much higher ARPUs, but the challenge is being able to get sort of the user to play your game consistently in terms of engagement. So those are the broad three realities. I think like with every other market, there tends to be a focus on getting the casual gamer to become sort of a mid-core and the mid-core to become hardcore. And that same trend we are seeing, thankfully, there's a huge population currently, which by all estimates is spending close to $1 billion now in in-app ads outside of the RMG space. They're spending close to $1 billion in these genres. And the idea is that how can you get some of these to go either expand into other subgenres with the same world or from other titles from the same publisher. So I don't know if that answers your question, but then I guess the other last part is that it's a 95% import market. So I think that's an important part to say that local indigenous content and studios really haven't made a huge dent when it comes to the monetization part of it. And quite fairly, frankly, I don't think really that's something we should absolutely work on, but it doesn't need to be that Indian studios have to be successful within India, because inherently these products are global products. So there's really no reason why, while we might want sort of indigenous products to do well within the Indian audience, absolutely, but in all likelihood, they will do very well with user bases over here in terms of your MAU and DAO, but your monetization should and always be focused in terms of a global audience.
So, just to follow up on that, when it comes to APAC, right? Obviously, there are giants like China and South Korea as well.
Yeah.
Within that setup, how important do you consider India as a market, and how much potential do you see in India if I am to compare to the two largest countries in the jurisdiction?
It is the largest market in the world when it comes to game downloads. It's also the #1 market in terms of growth of monetization for in-app purchases. So if you look at those two headers where you have the people and they're spending, it's obviously those two vectors are of high interest to any market. If some of our key customers in Korea as well as in Greater China, if you talk to them about which markets they want to expand to, India is clearly amongst the top 3 democratically across each one of these companies, right? I don't think one needs to pitch to them about how important this market is. You have seen some great local successes in terms of Krafton, which has now set up its base and doing publishing as well here. I think when it comes to development, it's primarily a mobile market. When you look at these markets where their future lies for them as studios and publishers, it's cross-platform. So when they think of titles, they think of AA and AAA titles that are accessible on mobile, but are also present on PC and console. And primarily it's because those two platforms end up spending a lot more money. So it hedges the bets that an audience can enter from any platform. They can still have an experience of playing with their peer group, regardless of whichever platform they come from, and they get the benefits of finding a way to hedge monetization across the board. But with India, it's primarily, I would say, mobile followed by PC, and PC's got a very limited base. So when they look at India, any of these markets, they look at what are the titles which are really good on mobile and probably mobile only, which they would want to launch over here.
Thank you. I think that's extremely insightful. And let me pick up on that point about India being mobile first. And it's true, the internet came to India through the mobile phone, through the smartphone. Nitin, wanted to just get back to you. Samir says India is essentially the DAO farm of the world. How do you as an operator take advantage of that?
So it's absolutely correct, right? So to say, I say in India, that's what, for us, like says Gameloft, right? So if I were to look at what really makes us have a level of focus with respect to the Indian market is basically certain KPIs with respect to the engagements, which are pretty healthy from the Indian market perspective. But I would say one important point, which while I did mention about the kind of growth which we have seen in the mobile space and the kind of revenue which had actually driven across. But one of the biggest challenges that developers had been facing on their side is with respect to the margins that they have been operating at. That is one of the big concerns as an organization we also had been a witness of, right? So, and we had seen a surge during the COVID period, right? So however, right, so we saw a significant impact or moderation, I would say, happening post-COVID for ourselves, right? And that made us actually, as an organization, have a rethink on our side with respect to the strategy, right? So just for the people who are not so aware, Gameloft fundamentally had been a mobile gaming company, right? So we started off as a mobile gaming company in 2000. And all those years, we have seen successes across on the mobile gaming. But however, right, so with the current trends which are visible, as an organization, we have taken a view that we have to work more towards cross-platform gaming, as Samir mentioned, right? And now our focus as an organization is PC console first with the kind of developments which we are having globally. Now, this also aligns well with the future prospect of India, right? So, and I would say because all this while, right, so in the past, right, so whenever I had these interactions, I had been talking more positively with respect to the growth of the free-to-play on mobile, but I seem to have a change of thought process in recent past, right? So where I believe with the way the behavioral trends are evolving in India, wherein I'm stressing upon that aspirational value and the premiumization which is happening in India. And we know, right, so we have multiple Indias within India, right? So there is a sizable segment which is actually willing to spend massively, right? So you have instances every day, right? So the lot being in news about the Coldplay event, right? And the kind of money people actually are willing to pay to attend, right? So people are willing to pay massively for experiences, and people are willing to pay, right? So I was reading the newspaper today in the morning, right? So in smaller towns, right, there is a massive surge with respect to the sales of the premium smartphones, right? So the iPhone and the Samsung devices. So that's the aspirational value which is seen happening in India. Somehow, right, so I believe now that if we actually put our focus effectively in the Indian market, keeping that in mind, we can potentially see is growth happening across on the PC and console gaming going forward in next few years, right? Versus, right, so the kind of growth that we are seeing on mobile. Reason why I'm saying is so mobile as a space has a long tail of developers who actually operate, right? And that's where you see, as Samir mentioned, right, so in India, we have developers actually working on creating content more focused to the mobile, right, and less on the console and the PC. And that's the space wherein we see less clutter. And that's where we are trying to play a little bit, right, so with respect to the free-to-play experiment on the PC side as well. And we have seen some good successes. I think as a future potential from the Indian market, somehow I'm starting to have a conviction that the PC console will eventually emerge in this market. Although, right, so it cannot compete to the level, right, so the kind of mobile gaming is. But even if you are able to achieve about 20, 25 mil kind of audience on the PC console, that's a sizable number that we are talking about from the Indian market perspective.
Of course. That's interesting on the growth of PC and control. And I think that's also, so going back to you, Samir, and I'll get you in just a moment, Shalet, but going back to you, Samir, I just wanted to ask you if you had a reaction to that. Do you agree that PC and console will emerge in India, or do you think it's going to be mobile first and mobile last all the way?
Yeah, console sales globally have flattened. They haven't grown post the pandemic. PC sales continue to be really robust. And I think, if between both of those, I think PC will be continue to be an important part. And you look at Riot's sort of, success with Valorant here in the PC market. And, one could probably say that it's sort of Valorant, as great as it is the spiritual successor to map control, like what Counter-Strike created. So in some sense, that audience base was pretty kind of keyed into that kind of gameplay type. Regardless, that kind of shows the fact that there is a deep groundswell for sort of the PC gaming market. You obviously have newer form factors which will emerge, like what you're seeing with headsets. But yeah, I do think this will always be a dominant mobile market, predominantly just because of the scale that's offered. There will be certain portions of titles which will be able to very well capture the cross-play element. Whenever a title like that launches on mobile, it's pretty obvious that the PC and the mobile audience will work together to play with. And I think that one part which I wanted to correct is that you are amongst the most populous countries in the world. So by default, you'll always have a lot of users, but you're also one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So that conversion of actually because the hardest part is finding players and keeping them. And if you do that, then that's what I guess a lot of gaming firms are clearly seeing, is that as the tide rises, their boats also lift. So that's sort of a segue between saying that as India grows richer, there will be the ability to, just like today, you have multiple devices in which you watch video, including sort of growth of HD and 4K screens in the TV room, in your living room with TV, and you also have mobile, and you watch video across any device. Similarly, you'll watch and play games across multiple devices.
Thanks. And that segues into my question that I had for you, Shalet. Both these speakers have spoken about monetization, and I know that's your expertise. So my question is, I don't want to ask you how to monetize in India, that's too broad. What I want to ask you specifically is, do you see differences in the way people monetize globally versus how they monetize in India? Are there things specific to India that will not work outside but work very well here?
Well, I think, yes, there's going to be a lot of difference in... So we, as Nitin mentioned and Samir, we are an economy that has too many types of people. We are varied in every way and sense. And I think with that being said, it is interesting that if I do what everybody else in the world does, it doesn't work for me at all. It works for me only when I custom create. Going back to the earlier point that I made, that if the ad isn't relevant to me as an individual, it doesn't really ring the bell. And I think, and hence it is important that when you are monetizing, you are catering to a segment of audience that relate to that particular ad or that particular interaction. And having said that, there is a trend that I also see, which has picked up in the last couple of years. One, I mean, we all were gamers. We all liked to game. I mean, right from when I was growing up, NFS was a thing. Like, I did the PC gaming. And I did that young. And did I continue doing it? No, I didn't. I moved to Candy Crushes of the world. I moved to the quicker formats that was easier to do at different junctures. And where did I move? I moved to the mobile. From a desktop journey to a mobile, because that's what I have all the time. I mean, I still have my phone with me. I'm still actively involved in what is happening out there. Now, does that mean, the way I see it is we are attracted to gaming always. We've always been attracted to gaming. I think it's the time that we've started to take gaming seriously as a hobby and a profession. The number of people, like the younger set, the Gen Z, Alpha, or that audience, I see them engage so heavily and learn so much about building a game even today, while they're doing whatever they do otherwise. So it's a hobby that's taken seriously. So I think as a to that question of whether we are global and India, do they really match? If you ask me, I think we are a very, very different set because of the population that we are. And we have so many micro sets within that.
It's complex, essentially. And which is why I wanted to also ask you about platforms, because when it comes to how people consume content in India, I understand that it's not exactly the same as globally, right? So we've had the rise of OTT and so on and so forth, but we also, I believe YouTube marketing is something that's, I wouldn't say unique to India, but something that India has clearly, it works very well here, right? So even in terms of platforms where you kind of push your content, what are the unique kind of takeaways for you when it comes to the Indian market?
So like we said, smartphones, we all pretty much live in that smartphone era. Like, we wake up to the alarm, we are pretty much powered by the phone, let's put it that way. We are powered by the phone because the phone is really telling you what to do when. Your calendar, your communication, your health is tracked on the phone. There are so many things that are basically on the phone. We're spending so much time on our smartphones today. I was looking at an average time spent that we see across in India. We're looking at 4.5 to 5 hours a day. And that's a lot of time spent on the phone, doing multiple things. Now, if that is true, I think platforms which are smartphone first is the first choice that a lot of us would end up using to advertise, to get to your audiences, because they're there. They're there, so be it platforms like YouTube, be it your in-app apps on the phone, which are like, your third-party apps, like some of these utility apps that we use very extensively on the phone. All of this becomes a part of our day-to-day because we are there. It's just about innovating in being there and being visible to the audience. So.
Thank you so much for that insight. That's very, very useful. So I did want to touch upon the theme of investments, and I know we are missing our marquee investor on the panel. So this is a question to all three of you, I guess, and we can go one by one, starting with Sameer. When it comes to global investment in Indian gaming, broadly, what are the trends that you're seeing?
I mean, I think there's a lot of money in India alone investing in gaming, regardless of global funds coming here. But, it depends on what sector you're looking at. Real money gaming is a whole different one, but I'll try and address it to the best extent I can. I believe right now, generally, there are two buckets. One is either you're looking at three, maybe, studios, publishers, and folks who are creating tools. Tool providers can be as broad as folks who are doing payments for games in general, or vertically focused on that, or generally doing anything which can help in getting games out faster to market or doing stuff in live ops. Within those three sectors, studios by far have kind of attracted a smattering of capital. I think most VCs don't look at that as a business which they can get really behind, although that's typically what you need, given that there are about 500 odd studios going to 1,000 who need to create IP. If one has to build indigenous IP from here, that's not going to be built by publishers, it's going to be built by studios. Publishers make a lot more sense generally for VCs because of the fact that they are inherently aggregators and they tend to have strengths in distribution and marketing, things that appeal towards the upwards and to the right sort of parameters that VCs look for when it comes to, will this be $1 billion business or not? And that's sort of what I look at as the three broad sectors within games, and then there is obviously a whole different world of RMG and the great successes that we have seen coming out of India over here, which not only build for India, but are building from here for that market. And it's probably the place where you have 100% domestic creation and consumption, and unlike the other half of it, which is 95% import and 100% monetization here.
Thank you. Shalet, just same question to you, but maybe you can also touch upon how to build from India, either for India or for the world.
Well, I think building from India, I think we've seen a lot of studios in India. I mean, be it the RMG space or the free-to-game space, in the last 5, 6 years, we've seen so many names that have been there making an impact, been there garnering a lot of audience who's constantly there. Primarily because like those points that I touched upon earlier, that we as an economy, or we as audiences, from desktop to mobile, because we are constantly there, we are constantly at it. And I think the easy access to all these available today has made it easier for all of us to be available on those platforms, play them whenever it's convenient. Gaming used to be a part of how we did, or it was a part of entertainment earlier, or part of a little part of what we did back in the day. To today, we are talking about we can game wherever, whenever, however. Probably take a break, play a game, come back, do your thing. And that is the kind of trends that we've seen move, right? So I think these are some of the trends that we've picked on. Like, it's our own consumer behavior. Like, I'm a strong believer of the fact that, before you start looking outside, start looking at your own self to say that, okay, how did I change as a person? Did I move from that to this and this to that? And you will see certain trends that are very much in sync with what is happening around you.
Thank you. And Nitin, give us the operator's perspective on that. What are you, and what's your advice to the scores of people here in terms of what is it that you need to do to raise investments globally?
I think it's a difficult question, right? So for me to answer, right? So, well, all I can say is like, it depends on like, so, it's important to have a clarity of thought, right? So where you want to be in a space, as a space, right? So like platforms is something that we have seen have delivered exceedingly well, right? So the last 4, 5, 6 years, right? And there's a definite reason, right? So behind it, right? So, and although, right, so I'm not so believer of the real money gaming per se to say. However, it has seen massive growth, right? So if I were to compare with respect to the free-to-play, right? And no offense to MPL, right? So, but yes, it has made huge impact, right? So in the Indian gaming space, right? So, and possibly the reason is something, right? So which I believe is like, so what is the motivation driving people into it, right? So it's definitely, right? So you are having a motivation to generate an income out of it, right? For yourself, right? So similar to, right? So what do you do in the stock market as the equity market on the derivative side? But if we were to look at from the studio perspective, I think that's where it's not an easy ride, I would say. So you have a massive competition which exists, right? So from the global players who are pretty much established players, and with the kind of huge investments which are needed for you to actually deliver a high quality title. That is something which I believe had been a pain point for the Indian studio ecosystem, right? So wherein they haven't had that kind of access to funds to deliver those quality titles. However, right, so we know we have the talent, right? I worked for EA, right? So EA has a massive studio in Hyderabad, right? And the time when I was in EA, right, so most of the work was happening, the quality work, right, so was happening in its international studios. It was only the porting work, which we used to do in EA Hyderabad, right? But I was recently talking to somebody, right, so who was in EA, right, so, and started his own venture now, right, and he did mention to me, right, so the kind of work that the EA is doing these days, right, so which is actually creating titles from scratch out of Hyderabad. So I don't have, I don't doubt the capability of the Indian developer ecosystem, right? So we have the talent out here. I think it's the challenge with respect to the access of money, right? So it's very important for you to have a very clear view with respect to if you are actually going ahead and starting a studio on the directional approach that you are going ahead with, and extremely critical to have a clear understanding of how you are going to monetize. I am a business guy, so I always talk about the monetization, but that's something which at the end of the day is the most essential subject, right? So it's very important to have that kind of clear vision, right? So how you are going to monetize for yourself, right? So and for the investors. Good thing is so there have been some good exits which happened in India on the studio side, so which is actually helping with more investments. We have seen some good investment with on the seed funding itself with studios in India. I think the trend looks positive. It's just that we needed some catalyst. I think we have those catalysts in place now.
I hope everyone took notes because there was a lot of wisdom in that answer. I had one last question for everyone, and after that we can throw it open maybe to the audience if they have any questions. And maybe Shalet, I start with you. Where do you see the world, how do you see the world see Indian gaming in 5 years?
I think 5 years is a lot of time. I mean, that's what I would
3
start
years.
with. 5 years, I mean, the way we are changing our own consumption pattern, 5 years is a lot of time. And I would really take it to 3 years. And I would say that, the way I'm seeing one major trend that is coming across is that we are a very young country. We are a young country. The youth of the country pretty much is what is driving a lot of consumption pattern. And, they're identifying a consumption pattern also, which is giving us a lot more to basically mull upon that we can basically shape what we want to shape for the next 3 years and 5 years. So it's up to us as advertisers, publishers, brands, to basically take note of what these consumption patterns are, what is it that the audiences pick up on, and basically build it from there. So that's...
Thank you, thank you. Nitin, coming back to you, how will the world see Indian gaming in, say, 3 to 5 years?
I think Indian gaming space is definitely going to mature going ahead, right? So a few trends that I foresee potentially happening in India. One is the evolution of the cloud gaming. We haven't actually touched upon that subject today, but yes, I definitely see cloud gaming growing in India over the next 5 years. Besides, as I did mention today, right? So with the change of my perspective on PC and the console gaming, I definitely see a good growth coming across on the PC side for sure. Right? And as Sami mentioned, right? So if I were to split between PC console, yes, definitely on the PC side, you are more optimistic versus console. But yes, definitely I see good growth coming across over there. Mobile, I am a bit circumspect, I would say, with respect to the growth. We have been talking about the growth of mobile gaming for quite many years. We haven't seen it yet. So I'm waiting for that inflection to happen for me to actually start believing in the mobile gaming potential in India.
Thank you. And Sameer?
Yeah, I think India is looked as the last great hope right now for the growth in gaming. So if you look at globally, there have been so many layoffs over the last 2 years in gaming, right? And this has been the only probably sector within, only region which has actually attracted consistent investments. I was, we were in the US earlier part of the year, and there were a bunch of startups, and the first thing they were talking about is, do you know who Nazara is? So yeah, when a US startup starts telling you about, that they're looking to raise money from an Indian conglomerate, you know that you've arrived at the global stage in many ways. I see what's happening with publishing here. So generally, I think people know that the users are here, there is capital, and that they're paying. So those are 3 great stories. The second part, I think, for indigenous title creation, over the next 2 years, you'll see a lot of what's been in the oven, especially with shooters. We have 5 to 6 studios who are building shooters out here, which are in the AA, AAA sort of action genre. You're seeing folks trying to attempt sort of more mid-core, hardcore titles in RPG and RTS. So over the next 3 years, we'll see how that impacts. And the fact is, regardless of what happens to those, you will have a wealth of experience created amongst developers. Nitin spoke about sort of the background with EA and what happened during post-current, in his tenure and after his tenure. You're seeing that happen with Ubisoft here, Rockstar Games, Zynga. There's so many folks who have continued to come out over there and build their own studios. So in terms of people being and founders being able to build businesses here, having that wealth of experience, that's only going to grow, especially in the AA and the AAA part. So, yeah.
Thank you. And we can move to audience questions. We have about a couple of minutes left. So, any questions from the audience? You can probably just raise your hand and please. Is there a? Or should I?
Hello, guys. I have two questions. My first question is, what is the government and all the tech giants like Google, Meta, what are all they doing to encourage like devs and all the people involved in gaming industry? So, what is being done for skill development? Are there any courses for them, or any government-related policies or schemes for entrepreneurs that encourage any funding so that the people who are involved in tech and devs, they can be encouraged? And the second one is out of the free play and real money and esports we talked about. What do you see the future of in the next 5 years? If someone has to pick a niche, so what should we follow? Where you see the trend going? Apart from that, you already talked about the mobile games.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You want to take the question about big tech?
Yeah, quick one. On the big tech front, I think Google's done some phenomenal work when it comes to being able to support startups, especially on the cloud side of it with credits. There's also an excellent program which Play runs, which helps almost like an incubator, helps you understand and get to some sort of product market fit with what your games are. And plus, there's a whole new section which allows you to expand the regions in terms of addressable markets into APAC and North America. So that's what on the Play, and that kind of comes combined with what we do on ads, allowing you to find a way that you can smartly understand what kind of ROAS you can get in various markets. And the third being the ability to build natively, both using technology like AI. We have up to 350K that we give in credits. So that's sort of on the Google side. On the second part of the question as to what do you see as growing? I mean, all those three segments are growing. If you look at esports, it's roughly about 120 million as TAM. If you look at free to play in terms of monetization in app, that's, like I said, estimates are it's about $1 billion and going to become $4 billion in the next 3 years. So depending on what you want to play in, those, I guess, are the two segments which you could look at.
So that's our time. Thank you so much to the panelists for a very, very engaging discussion. Thank you so much to the audience for your time, attention, and your questions. And thank you, IMAI, for hosting all of this and for having us here. Thank you so much.